Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for braving the treacherous weather by SoCal standards. So we're super excited to have the next installment of our Biostat seminar series. Today, we're very pleased to have Dr. David R. Friedland, who will be presenting on using AI tools for research, manuscript development, and grant development. So for just a bit of background, Dr. Friedland is professor of clinical otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, associate dean for clinical research, director of clinical artificial intelligence applications, and director for clinical research services for at Keck School of Medicine here at USC. Dr. Friedland received his medical degree from Icahn School of Medicine at Sinai in New York City, where he completed his residency training in otolaryngology, head and neck surgery. He also completed his fellowship training in neurotology and skull-based surgery at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. So he started his career at the Medical College of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where he was division chief of pathology and neurootologic skull-based surgery, chief of division of research, and vice chair of otolaryngology and communication science. So scientifically, Dr. Friedland has conducted research on the use of big data and machine learning for improving care in otolaryngologic disorders.
ENT.
This work has devised novel algorithms to help them diagnose vestibular disorders, identify disparities in healthcare by geographic and social demographics. And so let's give a huge round of applause and thanks.
Thank you. We're going to keep it casual because it's freezing out, so leave the fleece on. This is be casual, so I hope you all interrupt me and ask questions and talk about some of this. Actually, this is not about my work or any of the data science I've done or any of those type of works, but I'm happy to talk about that at some point. But this is really came from Dr. Deng, who was in a seminar series we were doing, and I talked a little bit about grant preparation and AI, and she thought it might be of interest. I will guarantee there's probably some people here who have explored AI programs and other things more than I have, but I hope to give a fairly broad overview of some of the things that are out there, some of the considerations, some of the regulatory considerations, and also some of the ways that I have used AI. And now that USC is rolling out ChatGPT, EDU, there's some limitations there, but there's some opportunity there, so I hope to touch a little bit on that as well. It goes. First thing to know, regulatory wise, the NIH does have a policy on the use of AI for grant preparation, right? So applications that are substantially developed by AI or contain sections substantially developed by AI are not considered original ideas of the applicant. So the NIH will not consider those. But you may use AI in limited aspects for administrative burden. Be mindful about research conduct, the lack of originality, and NIH peer reviewers are not allowed to use AI in their critiques. So keep that in mind as you're developing your grant. If they're not allowed to use AI to do certain things, then maybe you shouldn't either. This is literally just the only sentence that the NIH has on it. It does not any more information on this, okay? I think the target of this was released in the same NIH guidance that also changed the rules on how many grants you can submit in a year cycle, right? 6 now. And I think part of that, they are connected, right? Because people were just having AI write grants and they were submitting 10, 20 grants. And it was less than 5% of people, but it was enough that the NIH said, okay, that's probably why they put this AI policy in here, not to inhibit you from correcting your grammar and making things clear and helping you out, which we'll go through, but really just to have people stop cranking out grants just based on AI with random ideas and other things. So just be mindful of that. Also be mindful if you've used AI, especially the large language models, you can tell AI wrote it, right? To some extent, especially if you don't reformat and edit. So reviewers are going to know that, hey, this paragraph or this whole section was clearly not human written. So just be mindful of that as well. I probably don't need to go through too much of this here, but you know, obviously, when people say AI, and when we're talking about this, we're not talking about all of AI, right? We're really kind of stuck in this little middle intersection here between maybe machine learning and natural language processing for the most part, maybe a little bit of image recognition stuff. So we're really talking about largely generative AI, right? That's what we're talking about here, not really even predictive AI. So the large training sets, the output is generative. We're not going to go into how that works. All right. USC, this is updated. So USC has AI information on their central website. I can share these slides at the end, so all the links in blue and other things will work. You can see this. So this was just updated because the last column now has OpenAI in it, which is our ChatGPT EDU, and it does define what you can and cannot share in these different programs. So I think I have a blow up here. So let's just go back here for a second. This column here in the middle, which says approved data classification, right? So Zoom is public and internal data. Microsoft is public and internal data as well as confidential data, right? Because obviously people are writing things in Word, they're putting things in Excel spreadsheets that are confidential USC information. That's all internal data. Everything else, Google, Gemini, Notebook, Workspace, and ChatGPT, it says public and internal data. Okay. I'm not sure what falls into confidential data. Probably not much of what we do falls into confidential data. I think if you're in administration and you're dealing with things like faculty bad behavior and other types of legal things, or you're dealing with internal USC financial projections and other things that are competitive, that is confidential data. But I think for most of what we do, it's internal data, but not necessarily confidential data. So just be aware of that. So these are the generally 4 platforms that are somewhat approved here. So Copilot, I'm not going to go much into Copilot here, because it's really not that good. But you do have it. It's more if you use your Office through the 365 app rather than your desktop app, you can get Copilot button and you can ask it certain things. Take it with a grain of salt. I have not found it to be particularly useful. I think most people here will use a Zoom AI companion to summarize their meetings. So I think that's very useful, right? You put on the AI transcribe, you get meeting notes. You can get meeting notes that are just a transcription. You can get meeting notes that are just action items. So you can use that for your meetings. Google Gemini, we'll talk a little bit about some aspects of Gemini and Notebook LM I often use, and we'll talk about that. The same web page, blue link at the top, also has other resources for use of AI on campus. So you can do that. All right. Lou asked me to also talk a little bit about manuscript preparation, so I put a little bit of that into here. I think they cross over in many ways. This is a paper just came out that really summarized most of the major editorial boards and their take on manuscript preparation and the use of AI. They're not against using AI to make sure that your manuscript reads well, is formatted well, is language-wise correct. It should not write it to a point where you would want to credit AI as a co-author, because it cannot be credited as a co-author. So they're against that. It shouldn't, and while the text part of it, they're a little bit more lax on. Image manipulation, they're very strict on. All right, no image manipulation, no image generation. And I think they're concerned about, manipulating your lab results and other things like that with AI in terms of those areas. So that's general policies. I did link down here below. This mouse doesn't show up on the screen. There we go. Like here's the Elsevier policy that pops up. So the use of generative AI in writing, and they have a lot of information there about how to use these tools. Again, they are not against using these tools. In fact, these publishers are using these tools to screen your manuscripts when you submit them to determine whether they even should be reviewed. So they're using them. So a lot of places you'll submit, you'll get within seconds, you'll get a rejection. Sorry, not appropriate for our journal, please, and that's AI that screened that clearly. So there are some policies out there, so just be aware of that.
I'm sorry, there's one hands on Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just wondering where the cutoff is. For example, if I was trying to make a small cartoon vector just for a figure for my intro and I go to Adobe Illustrator,
Yep.
even though I've created a file, I'm in my own, file creation, it'll also offer to generate vectors.
Mhm.
Is
Well, I
that,
think it should be noted here, it should be this sentence right here in the middle, which is AI cannot be used to create, alter, or manipulate data or results or images that are derived directly from research,
okay,
right? So they don't want your research represented by AI depicting your research because it may have alterations or exaggerations that are not reflective of the research.
I
Right?
see.
I don't think there's a lot of programs out now, right, that will help you create really nice graphs, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably, as long as they're reflecting the actual data, that's probably okay, but it's up to you to confirm that all the data points in that graph and all the depictions in that graph are accurate.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Is that something you think you need to acknowledge when you submit the paper, figure one was that a little bit of help in generating that?
Yeah, I think you may want to do that. I mean, a lot of places where you submit, if you have large data sets underneath it, they're gonna ask you for a file sharing or a data sharing type of agreement, right? You can, see the raw data at this website, whatever it is. So I think as long as you have that acknowledgement that someone can actually go in and see the raw data underneath that, I think it should be fine. You can always just check with the publishers. Some of the things to think about: manuscript preparation and research. I don't use any of these, but they are quite out there and fairly popular. So I'll just click on a few of these. Here's your research assistant. They'll look through articles, they'll provide summaries. I know the text is nearly impossible to see. They'll give you evaluations of each of the articles, so you can start writing and start putting things into your papers and have your references there and put everything together. So there are a bunch of these that do that. These are ones you can certainly explore, right? You can do researches, you can cite as you write, you can help with your writing, you can check your grammar, you can upload PDFs and get summaries and other things.
I'm sorry, we can only see slides on Zoom. Could you please share your desktop so we can?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, they're not showing up? Okay. Interesting. It is on my desktop. It's right
Yeah, so
there.
I think what we're sharing is just the PowerPoint
Oh, I see. He shared
instead of
that.
the,
Okay.
instead of the entire,
Let me
desktop.
do this. Share the whole screen. Let me know if this works now. We've just shared the whole
Yep.
screen.
That looks good.
You're good?
Yeah.
So we're just showing some of the website links here. We're up about here. So you can see some of the things that you can do. You can do your manuscript reviews. A lot of places use these. So just explore them. I don't really use them. But I think there are ways to organize your articles. You can put up all your PDFs. You can cite as you write. You can have it check your grammar. You can format it in certain different citing formats.
Do we know, do these tools, provide language that clarifies what, I guess, like the extent to which all communication is private, right? That if you
Yeah.
upload a document, it provides feedback. Does that document then go into their training data?
I think it's
in some
something
way,
to
shape, or
definitely
form?
look at, right? Certainly we'll talk about in ChatGPT where you can denote that your data should not be shared to train their model so that it's not out there in the universe. So definitely be aware that if you use these sites, you want to check the privacy settings. Whether you can personally set that your data does not get used to train their models and does not get used out there. I think I'd be very cautious if you didn't have that option, right? Especially if it's pre-publication research data. Because there have been instances, so certainly on ChatGPT, where, companies have used ChatGPT, or people in companies have used it, and other people have been able to discover internal company information because it has wound up in, 4.0 and 5.0 and all things like that. So you want to be cautious about that. Good point. In terms of grants, Grantable here is just again, I don't use it, but another example of something to manage the administration of your grant. So it helps you plan your grant, your different sections, your timeline, putting it together. So you can have your project description, and you can really put your project goals in there. So this is something that I think is compatible with NIH standards, because it is helping you be the administrator for putting your grant together. It is not writing your grant for you or creating the grant for you. So these are some things to think about in terms of putting that together. Everybody here probably uses PubMed. PubMed also has something called PubTator, which is a little bit more introspective in certain areas. So it's just the same. It's by by the NIH as well, supported. And what that looks like is you can put in a disease, you can get your information, you can cross-reference diseases, and you can choose what concepts, excuse me, you want to highlight in those, like certain diseases or variants. And actually these articles are highlighted in that way. So when it shows a disease, it's in orange. If it shows a species, it'll show that up. So when you look at the articles themselves, it'll actually highlight these different concepts. You can filter by journals, by different types of, lower down, it'll say different types of articles and other things. So it's another way to do a PubMed search, but to do it a little bit more specifically for certain things that you might be closely interested in. So you can explore that, because it might just give you more flexibility in PubMed. Because PubMed sometimes one little typo and you get 0 response, right? So these are ways to maybe be a little bit more focused on what you want. Semantic Scholar is another research tool, so that might help you with papers. Again, these are using resources like PubMed, the National Library of Medicine, and all other things. So they're just another ways to search, like a PubMed search, but they are probably a little bit more intelligent, and they can give you more information that you might want. Site AI is another one. So just a whole bunch of things to explore. All right, let's go to some of the USC stuff that we do have. Notebook LM is part of Google, and that is an approved component of this. So if you are signed into your USC account under Google and you use your drop-down menu, you will see Notebook LM. Generally, the interface looks like this. On the left side is where you add your sources. In the middle, it gives you a summary. On the right are certain things that it allows you to do. And actually, there are a few more buttons now than there are on this screen, because they just recently updated it. So update sources. So you can upload documents. You can put in YouTube links. So under the links here, you can do YouTubes and websites. You can paste in your own text. You can go to your Google Drive and link it. You can import PDFs. I think it limits you to 50. Okay, but it's super useful from that standpoint. So here's an example. I had a whole bunch of PDFs. I was researching, I think this was the use of sound to augment vestibular function. So there's some evidence that people with imbalance might be helped by sound, gives you kind of a sound awareness. So I had a whole bunch of PDFs that I was obviously went to PubMed, found them, started reading them, and was like, okay, how do I put this all together? So I loaded them up there. It gives me a summary of that, and it gives me a box here where I can specifically ask it questions about that. And then there's other features it can do. It can give you an audio overview. I'll talk about that in a second. Video overview was recently added. It can give you mind maps. So it gives you the different concepts and how they're all related. All right, I'll show that. Flashcards. So here's a mind map. Getting cut off on this screen. But you can see over here, so for example, it'll talk about hearing loss and cochlear implants and different methods, and then it opens up into different areas. And as you click on these, it'll open up into more. So you can start connecting the points. You can figure out in terms of your research, which path you might want to take. Hey, you know, this one is important, this one is not. Like for this information, I was more interested in people with vestibular loss, not necessarily people with Parkinson's disease. Okay, so it shows you the different structures there. You can do flashcards if you need to study. So if you're studying for something or trying to learn something, right, it'll give you a card, you read it, you try to answer it, you get the card, it flips it over, gives you the answer on the other side. All right, so you can do bunches of flashcards and quizzes. You can get a report, different things, and you can see here that it will give you the references. So if it mentions something, you can click on the reference, confirm that the reference is correct. You've got to check that, but not always. And then there's okay, you don't want to. There's podcasts, which I think is an excellent feature. It's not working just on the system, but you put in something, you click auditory audio overview, you get a choice. It can be a brief overview, it can be a comprehensive overview. You have a box that you can type in, you can say focus on this, focus on that, do this, do that. And it'll give you a very engaging podcast. Which, you know, you drive home, you put it on, or you're exercising, you're doing whatever. So for example, one of the things, and Ari knows this, we were looking at FDA regulations, right? So there's a whole bunch of FDA regulations about human subjects research. So I just took the document, the actual FDA document, put it into Notebook LM, and that was the only document in there. And I said to Notebook, I said, I want you to use this document only. Do not seek out any other references or information. Stick with the information in this document. I want a comprehensive overview to understand what the regulations are. I want you to use repetition to make sure I get the point. And it says it throughout the podcast. We're going to repeat often. And it does. And it went through it very clearly and very systematically. It was about a 20-minute podcast for one of the major regulatory documents, and it was very clear, very engaging, and you can do it while you're walking, and you retain it. So it's very useful. So if you have a paper you need to summarize, just put one paper in here, ask it to summarize, ask it to give you the key points, or whatever you want to get out of the paper, and just listen to it. I think it's a very easy way to catch up on things.
You also, you mentioned inserting citations in the text there.
Yeah.
Would also then generate the bibliography if you're writing a paper.
Notebook LM is less about writing. I think the others are, the Cite AI, the Scholar, those are ones that'll generate the bibliographies. And many of those I would explore them, but probably you can tell it what format the bibliography should be in as well. I mean, the other reference managers that we all use, and Node and others, they all have AI built into them now to do a lot of this anyhow. This is more for learning and studying and keeping certain concepts together. The video overview is odd. I don't think it's ready for prime time. It's not real video. It's like a slideshow with static slides. More like a slideshow with static slides. But it can be entertaining. I'm not sure it's ready for research yet. There's a couple new ones that were just put in. I don't have them on here. I'm trying to remember which ones they were, but explore it. It's super. It's part of your USC thing. If you're just logged in, I think you'll find it useful. Gemini is also in the Google, so the same thing. If you're logged into your USC account and you go to your Google apps, you'll see Gemini. Know that in Gemini, unlike ChatGPT, when you do a chat or a question, yeah.
Does Gemini work for everyone? Like, my account says that my Google Enterprise would let me use Gemini.
I don't know.
As a staff member, everybody is. Y'all use it.
When you log into your Google, do you have to go through SSO? Yeah, me too. And it just seems to, you know, I
Yeah,
don't know.
mine says your business account, or your Google account. Okay, I'll try it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like when Notebook LM first came out, I had to email for permission. I don't know if you still have to do that, but I had to. So the links I showed in the beginning, either from USC IT or David Galassi here is the head of School of Medicine IT, so he can provision you for those things. But no, I haven't heard that. Gemini, when you do a chat, similar to other chat, it's on the left side. Just be aware, you can't delete your chats in Gemini. All right, so they're just gonna pile up and you can only rename them. So, depending on what you're asking and chatting and whatever, it's just gonna pile up there. So a few things it can do, which is interesting. So you see that I had a Canvas test here. I asked it to program a tic-tac-toe game. And it was very interesting. It did a nice job. I mean, it gave you the program, it shows you the code, and it also plays the program. And you can modify it around those areas. Few other things, you can do guided learning, so you can ask it to help you learn a concept. You can do deep research is more of the scientific research, right? I need to learn about this topic. It can create images and canvases for building programs. It's getting better, I will say. Gemini is definitely moving along. I think Apple just signed a contract with Google to use Gemini to power Siri, because we all know Siri doesn't do anything to tell you where the nearest yoga store is. So the Gemini Deep Research will kind of break down your ideas, give you some planning, help you synthesize reports and put things together. Perplexity is another program which I think is useful for research, for understanding topics. It's just basically it's a search engine, okay, and you can use it almost like Google. So you can use it for almost anything. But from a research standpoint, what did I write here? What is the latest research on cell therapies for type 2 diabetes or something? So it'll give you the articles. It'll give you a breakdown and the references. Consensus is useful as well. I like consensus if you're dealing with things in which there may be non-universal consensus. All right, so you go to consensus and you say, this is the topic. I think I was looking, here's the auditory stimulation again. One, it tells you things like, this was a non-randomized controlled trial. This was a randomized controlled trial. This is in a very rigorous journal. So it can kind of give you a little bit of where you might want to focus your effort. If you click on one, so I clicked on 2 here, it told me what the population was, what the sample size was, how long the trial ran for, what was the trial methodology. So that helps you break down the papers very quickly to get to things that you might be interested in. And then, do I have it on here? Yeah. And then it gives you a consensus. So if I looked at all the literature, so I said, does auditory stimulation enhance neuromotor control and gait? And it told me that 15 articles said yes, 2 articles said probably, right? And then there were a couple that were kind of mixed, all right? So it'll kind of break it down into the arguments, which is great if you're writing a grant, right? Because if you're writing a grant and you're going to say, well, I'm going to study, this type of vision, this and that, because the literature suggests it's important. Reviewers always want you to acknowledge that there may be controversy to there. In fact, it's probably helpful to do a grant to study something in which there is controversy, because then your grant is actually exploring something that is novel and that needs to be answered. And that's how you define your gap in knowledge. So this will help you define the gap in knowledge and put the references for you on either side of that gap. So I like consensus, and that's also in ChatGPT. So if you go to ChatGPT and you have all your GPTs in chat, consensus is one of them. So you don't have to necessarily go to their own website.
Can I ask a question about the consensus?
Yeah.
Have you tried this on clinicaltrials.gov? So clinical trials tell you all the existing clinical trials, and they have some semi-structured format. But sometimes, it's not so clear, like all the inclusions, exclusion criteria. I mean, they're listed in natural language, but maybe this tool structures it better. Have you tried it, or?
I have not asked it to go to clinicaltrials.gov. I think it's more of a interface over things like PubMed and National Library of Medicine. I don't think it will API into clinicaltrials.gov. I have asked ChatGPT to go into clinicaltrials.gov, and ChatGPT agent can go into that and does a fairly good job if you give it specific instructions.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
So I kind of missed, if you're using ChatGPT, how do you use the consensus app?
Oh, I'll go over that in just a sec. Actually, you can see it in my screen grab here that I was using it right there. So if you go to GPTs and you go to Explore, ChatGPT will give you a large drop down of tons of different categories and other GPTs that are kind of using their large language model. One of them is consensus under research, or you can go to your own consensus site. So a few things about ChatGPT. One is in terms of setting it up. These links here are two webinars that were put together by Patrick Crispin, Academic Affairs here. And they're just general overviews and introductions to ChatGPT. They're from about a year ago, so obviously they're a little out of date. But they're useful to just get it the lay of the land if you're not familiar with it at all. All right. Couple of things to know. So in ChatGPT, on the bottom left is where your name is. So if you've already signed up from your USC one, it'll say your name with USC. If you have your own account, that's where your name will be. Click on that, and that's where you get to your settings. Under settings, you'll have a whole bunch of settings. One of them is data control. All right, with the university one, it's already internally contained, so you don't have to worry about the data controls. But if you're using your own or your own account, you can turn off you can say improve the model for everyone off. That means it is not sending your data out to its servers to train the next version of ChatGPT. All right, that's what keeps your data alone in your thing. Then there's a section that's about you. You can tell it how you want it to refer to you, right? So you can say, you know, Queen of the Universe, and it'll always tell you that. You can tell it a little bit about you. So I told it, basically the bio you read, you put into there. All right. So it knows kind of your education level. It knows the things you focus on, what your angle is. So when it responds, it will take that into account. All right. And it will give you a little bit more of a tailored response, more about you, things along those lines. And then what I did with the new version, so once I got into the USC version, the first chat I did with it was this. I said, what do you need to know about me so we can communicate better? Anything further you want to know? And it said, this will help me. I want to know what depth of citations you want, what scope, what type of lens, decision support. And there was a ton of stuff. It asked me a whole bunch of bullets. And so I answered. All right. And we had a conversation back and forth. Me saying, okay, what else do you need to know? And it telling, well, do you like tables? Do you like narrative summaries? What do you want from here and there? And then once we did all of that, I said at the very end, provide me instructions to put in my personalization section. So under settings, it says personalization. I said, so that you can know how to communicate with me. So it gave me this. All right. There's a word limit, and it gave right up to the word limit. And it told me, address me by my name, use research first lens, very high synthesis. I asked it, anything it tells me, it needs to give me a confidence rating. Okay, from 1 to 10, and only provide me things that are greater than 7, and anything below that, tell me it's speculative. All right. Use comparative tables when there's more than 3. This is the style I like. This is that. And so if you go at the top there, it says personalization, and then it says instructions. That's where you put that in. All right. And then that really helps. So anytime I'm on ChatGPT now, it gives me a score. It gives me a confidence score for everything. It gives me caveats. It tells me how it will increase the confidence score. It tells me why, if I ask, it's not confident in those things. So that can be useful to tailor it to the level of information you need. Some of the other things to know, in the middle here, I talked about temporary chat. So at the top right of ChatGPT is a little dotted circle. If you just click it, that's like a temporary chat. That's something you might not want to save. So that's like doing a Google search. All right. So I use that if I'm just doing a quick search, or I just need quick information or something assimilated, or I need a figure or a picture or something, along those lines. That way it just doesn't save it. I don't have to worry about deleting it later. It's just getting the information I need. If you're working on something that you're coming back to, so you're working on your research or you're doing something else, then you may want to start a project. Okay, so a project will be a folder, and in the folder we'll have a number of chats that you can have. So if you come back to it in a week and you've already chatted with it, and you've already uploaded some PDFs, and you've already, generated some data, it will stay within that project, and it will stay within the memory of the system, so that the next time you chat with it, that is part of the answer. Okay, as opposed to a single chat where it may just lose it or start de novo. Okay, so I have again that noise-induced hearing loss. I've got a lot of different chats underneath that. You know, give me the guidelines for this, find the information on this, all sorts of trials along those lines. This is the ChatGPT Explorer part. So under the GPTs, there's Explore. So this is the subsection that says research and analysis. There's other ones that are like lifestyle and entertainment and languages and coding and all sorts of things. So that's where you can find other GPTs. The USC version right now is very limited. They haven't turned all of these on. In fact, they've turned almost none of them on. So there's almost nothing you can work with, but they will eventually get there. Okay. The other thing, and I'm not going to go into it here too much, but they have not turned on make your own GPT. Right, but eventually you should be able to generate your own GPTs. So if you have a particular thing, like I know one of the things here, like the Office of Faculty Affairs here, right? They took the university handbook and they made their own GPT. So for their internal operations, they ever need to know anything about how USC works, they have the handbook in a GPT and they just ask it. Doesn't do anything else except read the handbook, but it'll tell you what's in the handbook and then take you to the section of the handbook because the handbook's, you know, hundreds of pages long. So anything you have, you can generate your own GPTs, and eventually we're supposed to be able to share them and collaborate on them and do things like that. Scholar GPT is one of those GPTs. You can use it to really dive into some research and some understandings, and it'll break it down into different ways of looking at your literature. So depending on how you want to do it, right? Do you want to just extract the key concepts? Do you want to, you know, summarize it? Do you want to check some assumptions you have or things along those lines? So there are different ways to look at it. And again, if you ever have questions on ChatGPT, you just ask it, right? And this literally came up because I said, how do I use Scholar GPT? Here are 9 things you can do with me, you know, and it'll just tell you. And you know, if you do get a response from it and you're not sure about the response, say, how did you come up with that response? Or why is your response that way? I've had it where it's told me something which just didn't sound right. And I said, that does not sound right, this and that. It came back and said, oh, you know, I looked at that, I looked at this, you're correct. I was wrong. And it will be wrong at times. So you have to make sure you check things as you go through it. Agentic AI, I don't think is part of the USC one. If you have your own account, Agentic AI can be very useful. Jose Luis, that's where I used it to generate an API to pull projects out of clinicaltrials.gov. So I asked it to, I need an API to pull projects out of clinicaltrials.gov. I want, you know, the appropriate criteria for USC, University of Southern California, you know, anything that has our information, and that helped us to be able to pull research projects out of that. So you can use it for coding, you can use it for searching, you can use it for doing things. It usually runs for about 20 minutes, right? So, and it'll tell you as it's running what it's doing. Apparently people use it to make reservations, to purchase things online. You know, you say, I want you know, a red jacket, it has to be a size medium, it has to be this and this, and it'll find it and order it for people. I have not done that, but apparently it can. So reviewing and summarizing materials is great, especially if you tell it, these are the materials I'm uploading. Do not use any other information. Stick with these materials. Or you often have to tell it that. You can ask it to generate reviews and quiz you, generate code. I'll talk about drafting.
Can I ask you a quick question on that experience?
Yeah.
So were you able to do some evaluation? I mean, some of these things kind of lead themselves to like a good formal evaluation. Others, like if they give you references and the references are wrong, they're going to say, well, I know 10, whatever, 7 out of 10 references were right and 3 were wrong. But in the clinical trials, did you do any evaluation? Because, I mean, obviously these agents are, I mean, all the frontier models and so on, they're very useful, but I always have this kind of concern when you ask for something technical and how good it really is. Because, and I don't know if it's in the 80%, 90% or 50% right. So if you pull things out
Yeah.
of clinical trials, whether, I mean, you had some inclusion exclusion criteria, did you do some actual
Yeah,
check
I mean, I went
somewhere
back
else and see
in.
how many actually got right? Because maybe it's just making it all up. I suppose not, but I mean, that evaluation I think is very important in this type of systems.
I agree. And I have found some things that it just doesn't do a good job on. I have given it spreadsheets and told it to analyze the spreadsheet, big spreadsheets of information, and it has not done a good job when you go back in and look at it yourself. But there are other things that it seems to nail right on and I don't know the distinction there. Maybe it's the way I'm giving it the prompt, or maybe it's the structure of the data. But some things it's good and some things it's not. So it's
Well,
always
I mean,
up to
my
you.
opinion is like it's not magic, and and the kind of technology that is behind is this autoregressive kind of semi-supervised learning plus some human feedback. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not going to solve some hard problems, but it can solve so many common problems. And the question is, it's very hard to know when it's giving you the right answer versus not.
Right.
For when
Well,
there are
that's
more
why
specific technical answers. And so I'm curious, everybody who uses these type of systems, like if they evaluate how well they really do,
right.
then knowing that, so that everybody kind of you get some sense of the limitations and the capabilities.
Yeah, and the other thing to recognize with these systems is if you ask ChatGPT for the same thing 3 different times, it's going to give you 3 different things, right? It is not using a deterministic algorithm, right? It is off on its own. So it will give you 3 different things. So it is really up to you to evaluate what's coming back. Right? So here's one way I use it, and you may want to use it when you're writing papers or writing your grant. So, right, I don't like to sit there and type, or I can type okay. If you use Word and you use the dictate in Word, it's not very good, right? It always makes mistakes, it's laggy, it's glitchy. So I go to ChatGPT and this is the instructions I gave it. And I have one of my chats is just transcriptionist. So I need you to act like a secretary transcriptionist. I am not allowed to have you write for me. Okay, so this is my grant writing one because you're not allowed to write for me. The NIH says you can't write. All right, so I'm not allowed to have you write the text for me, but you can help format it, clean it up, ensure the grammar is good. All right, so I will describe some sections for you and then you arrange it for me. All right, so it made very clear to me what it was going to do. I'll arrange the content, I'll fix the grammar, I'll format it. Good, we're all on the same level. And then I go to the dictate part, and I talk. All right, and I will say, let's think about, okay, next paragraph, let's do, once upon a time there was, no, scratch that, we don't want to do that. Say there was a house in the woods, blah, blah. And it'll take all of that, it won't do my it won't do the uhs. If I say scratch that, go back to the beginning, it'll fix it, it'll do it. So then ultimately it'll put out a nice clean piece of text. Okay, so you can use it to kind of do your transcription for you and really help you get information out there. It'll give it in whatever format you want. So so that's one way.
That wasn't on for everyone with the new USC EDU account, but IT will
I think
make an
that
accommodation.
the dictate button is on, but I don't think the conversation button is on for everybody. So there's 2 different ones, yeah.
Are you using the USC one for this?
This was actually my own.
Okay. Oh, you're on, okay.
This is-
But do you feel like you're putting in your IP basically into this? So then you're trading it with your.
Well, I'm not sharing it, so I have that turned off.
Okay,
Right, so
so what prompt did you tell it, like, do not use this discussion?
Well, when I showed in the beginning where you set up your personal settings in ChatGPT and you say, do not use to train other models. So yeah, so there are 2 buttons here when you're on your chat line. One is the microphone, which allows you to dictate into the transcription box. The other is the circle, which is the conversation one, and I'm not sure that's been turned on for USC. I think it might have just been turned on. I saw it this morning.
Right here it says use voice, so.
Okay. And we'll talk about how to do that. So that I use for that. This is agent. All right, so this is an agent. I said I'm an otolaryngologist. Said it right. And I'm interested in grants, for our field. Can you go out? Here's some examples, and go find the grants and put it in an Outlook calendar. And it did. It worked for, as you can see, it worked for 53 minutes. All right, it compiled a list of foundation and society grants, told me what the grant is, what the mechanism is, when it's due, and an example. And this goes on and on and on. So if you're looking for grants, you're looking for foundation things, you're looking for support, this is where agent can come in, right? Because it'll just do the web search for you rather than you searching the web for probably more than 53 minutes to find all of these and compile them and put them in a table. This doesn't. Okay, obviously you have to go check them. It did a pretty good job because I know most of these organizations and I think it did a pretty good job. All right, so this is the other button, not the transcription button, but the conversation button. All right, so next to transcription is the circle, and that's where it's actually a conversation. You can set what voice you want and what type of person you want to talk with. But you can set it up so that you will then be able to have an interactive learning environment with it. So in this one, it was like, can you interview me, find out about my work, make recommendations for AI programs that may be useful. Here's my knowledge, and let's go for that. And so it started to go through that. I said, well, okay, first we're going to talk about your work, then we're going to talk about your challenges and your opportunities, and then we'll talk about what your comfort level is with these things. So you can help explore these things. I've used that to prepare for tough conversations, right? I said, I have to pitch a new program. I know that the administrator I'm talking to is going to be very focused on the finances of it, and they're going to be pushing back at me, practice with me of what I can do. And we had a 20-minute conversation where, it's playing the role of the administrator and I'm trying to pitch my thing, and then it will come back and say, well, did you think about making this argument? I'm like, okay, let's try that again. And then you make the argument again. It says, oh, good job, because you can tell it's to be encouraging to you, and all of that. So it's really useful for practicing conversations. If you have to practice your presentation, do your presentation and ask it for feedback.
Did your administrator say good job?
We're still working on that. It was more hospital, but you know how that is.
I just had a general question about whether you think ChatGPT or others are there to please you and tell you nice things and make you feel all warm and fuzzy in cases where maybe you don't want that.
Well, and in your personalization section, you can tell it how to respond. There's like a section there where it says, respond very matter of fact, or respond with lots of emojis. Some people like that, so there are areas where you can tell it how to respond. It will often pick up on your response patterns and respond and reflect that back to you because it's just trying to mirror you, right? So if you start being nasty to it, then, give me this already, hurry up. It'll be nasty back, right? I tend to think I'm having a conversation, so I write a lot of please and thank you and can you please do this? I don't know, that's just the way I interact with it, and it does tend to respond a little bit more along those lines.
I had to go into my preferences to tell it to never use the structure, blank is exactly the blank, because so often I would say try to understand something and I would propose something and it'd be like, oh, that is exactly the, and it was just like this tell, and now you start seeing that everywhere. It's like, okay, that's the tell, that's like this baked in response of get the pat on the back, and it's like, I don't, let's just get straight to the matter.
Yeah, and that's what I told it. I mean, in addition to my preferences, I did my kind of personality assessment. I said, this is what I am. I'm very matter of fact. I don't want padding. I don't want this. Just cut to the chase. And let's kind of go to gives me. Yeah.
It feels like we got used to praising AI, but one day we forgot to praise AI. So go at work, stop working. I worry about that part. I just want to do.
No, I don't think it's gonna come after you. But you never know. You better just be nice.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. The university is starting to do some rollouts for their GPT. They had one session, train the trainer. I was part of that. I think it's supposed to have another one because it wasn't really. It was like the folks from OpenAI, and they went through in 45 minutes. They went through 10 hours worth of information. But it was the good part about it was a lot of prompt generation information about how to be very specific about your prompts. And that was kind of the things that I showed you about, give me a confidence level, you know, make sure it's this, if it's less than this, tell me it's sketchy, you know. So a lot of it is about making sure that your prompt is very, very specific. Don't just give it a big, broad question. Tell it exactly what you want and what its boundaries are and where it can go and where it can't go and what it should look at and how it should respond and what type of information you want. The more you put into that prompt, the better the information that you'll get out of it. Any questions? So there's a lot in here to explore, right? I mean, like I said, a lot of these I don't use, some of them I do. But like the writing ones, Gen AI, Cite AI, Scholar AI, I mean, all of those, I would probably explore those and see which works for you in terms of your research and gathering the information you need. The ones that have little notebooks and other areas where you can keep projects is great because then you can keep your stuff organized better. And then every time you come back to it, it's all encapsulated. All right. Thanks.
Are there any questions online? No? Okay, all right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's very helpful, thank you.
Right.